Hey guys, I'm Doctor McFarland, and in this video I'm going to show you the 4-cable method and also how to run other pedals in the loops. So this is a very common setup when you want to use a real amplifier. Maybe it's a tube amp or it could even be solid state. But regardless of the type of amp it is, it has to have an effects loop. And that basically means it needs to have a send and return. So that way you can access the preamp section of the amplifier and also the power amp section of the amplifier and do different kinds of routing depending on what you're wanting to do. I do have a cable here that I made many years ago. It's just 3 cables, and including the guitar cable, that completes 4 cables, i.e. the 4-cable method. So what you have to do is essentially go guitar to the input of the ToneMaster Pro. And then we're going to take one of these cables, and in my case, it's the one with the sleeve on it. And I'm going to use effects loop number 3 to take a send to the input of the amp. Okay, and then from the send of the amp is going to be the return of effects loop 3 on the back. So that's plugged in. And then the output of the ToneMaster Pro, and in this case, I'm going to use output 1, left. And the output of the ToneMaster Pro is going to go to the return of the amplifier. Now, what you hear right now is just a guitar essentially going straight into the effects return of the amplifier. Because just like any other modeler that you've seen me demonstrate here on the channel, if you don't have an effects loop block in the actual digital signal path, then the unit is not going to know to complete the chain of cables that we have connected so far. So what we have to do now is click and add a block, go to effects loops, and I'm in effects loop 3. Once I've added this, it now completes the signal chain, and I am now successfully running my guitar into the preamp of the amplifier, and also I can have certain effects after my effects loop and certain effects before my effects loop. So this is what we have right now. Okay, so it sounds like a real amp because I'm actually playing through the real amp just with the ToneMaster Pro now in the effects loop of the amplifier. So that means if I go and add an overdrive, maybe I want to do the enchanter, and now play. The enchanter is going into the front end or the input of the amplifier, but we don't have any wet effects yet. So I can go and add maybe a delay. Okay, now that delay is going into the effects loop of the amplifier because it's coming in after my effects loop 3. If I put this before effects loop 3, it is now going to go to the input of my amplifier. But usually my wet effects like delay and reverb, I want in the effects loop of the amp. All right, so this is what you would do if you wanted to do an effects only type rig. Now, if we want to add an amplifier here, we can add a block. Let's do this before the effects loop. And let's add a Princeton reverb amp only. And now this is the sound we have. Now at this stage in the game, I'm actually running an amp model into the front end of a real amplifier, and you are really just doubling the preamp sound, which I'm not a big fan of. So when we bypass the effects loop block, I am now also bypassing the send and return on the ToneMaster Pro, and it's just like I'm going guitar input straight from the output of the ToneMaster Pro to the effects return on the amplifier, and you are bypassing the preamp of the amplifier itself. So now my amp model is providing the preamp sound, and I still get my delay after the amp and my enchanter before the amp. All right, so I can go ahead and save this. We'll call this 4-cable method. So now if you want to use a little bit of both, you can use a virtual amp model, and you can still use amp channels on your amplifier. Maybe you have a multi-channel amp that has a clean, a crunch, and a lead channel, or you can still do that. So for example, let me change the amp over to the drive channel. Okay, so now I'm on the modern channel of the Blue Guitar Amp 1, which is an amp I've used in many other videos to demonstrate this method and this concept. So with the effects loop off, I am still bypassing the preamp sound of the amp, so you're not going to hear the dirt channel. Okay, let me bypass the enchanter. So we're still hearing the Princeton. Now if I bypass the Princeton amp and turn back on the effects loop, I get the dirt channel on the blue guitar. So now you can see that I can blend any amp model from the ToneMaster Pro in any channel I want for my amplifier just by making different presets with some things on and some things off. And you can really just mix and match as much as you want. Now, another question that I recently saw on the Facebook group is somebody wanted to add in the Friedman IR pedal that just came out recently. And they want to be able to use that as well with the amp models on the ToneMaster Pro and the amp channels on their real amp. I mean, that's a lot going on, but that's totally possible. All you have to do, since I'm already using Effects Loop 3, I would add the Friedman IR X, or whatever it's called, into Effects Loop 4, and that would be represented by a block within the signal path. So now I'll just go add a block, Effects Loops, Effects Loop 4, add that in. So at this point, it's really no different than adding a virtual amp. You would just go and bypass Effects Loop 3. So that way you're only using the real amp as your power amp and your cab. And now Effects Loop 4, which I'll go ahead and put before Effects Loop 3. Effects Loop 4 is now going to be your amplifier. So you don't want to have an amp model engaged in the signal path, and you just want whatever's in Effects Loop 4 to be on. So that way your dirt pedals go into the front end of your Friedman or whatever preamp pedal that you have. And you can still have your wet effects after that. And that would accomplish the same goal as what you're wanting to do with having ToneMaster Pro amps, channels from your real amp, and also any preamp pedals that you have in the signal path. Now you wouldn't want to use Effects Loop 1 and 2 because those can't be moved anywhere in the chain other than the front of your signal path. So Effects Loop 3 and 4 is going to be your best option because you want to be able to move those to the middle of your signal chain so you can have dirt pedals before the amp, delay, reverb, and other modulation after the amp. And that way you can also utilize amp models and whatever else is in Effects Loop 4. So I hope that makes sense and that answers your questions out there on how to use the ToneMaster Pro in the 4-cable method. So if you have any questions, leave a comment down below and be sure to subscribe and click the bell for more videos on the ToneMaster Pro. I am Dr. McFarland and I will see you in the next video. Keep rocking.